A lot of auditors are generalists, but you're going to want to find an auditor who has experience with referenceable crypto clients, right? If you're a Bitcoin miner, have you worked and audited another Bitcoin miner? Because the nuance between a Bitcoin miner and, say, a stablecoin issuer is vastly different.
Welcome to TNF Takes, the go-to spot for crypto companies and on-chain organizations. This is Jeremy now. I'm here with Noah Buxton and Nick Ward. We're here to help you thrive in a world of wild markets, volatile regulations, and evolving tech. It's everyone's favorite time of the year coming up. It is the holiday season. No, not Thanksgiving, not Christmas. It's almost audit season, folks. For all my 1231 year ends out there, that means that it's time that you're probably shopping for an audit. That's why we've come to you today with 5 green flags when selecting a crypto native auditor. That's not all. We'll end with a couple tips and tricks. But before we do that, let's dive in. Let's introduce our special guest. Noah, Nick, how are you guys doing today? Good to see you guys again.
Awesome. Looking forward to sort of demystifying some of what companies should be looking for during audit shopping season, some best practices to go through the process and hopefully get a good result at the end.
Yeah, likewise. Good to be here, Jeremy.
Yeah, good to see y'all. Well, before we dive into the green flags and understanding what things to look for when finding a crypto auditor, why is it essential to have an auditor who understands crypto in the first place? Noah, you've been doing this for years now. Why is this important?
Yeah, I think it's for multiple reasons. Crypto passing through your financials, sitting on the balance sheet or being part of your transaction set, in your profit and loss statements, creates a ton of unique challenges. Obviously, from the management accounting side, which you're probably familiar with on a day-to-day basis, it also really creates unique challenges in the audit context as well. And so this is not trivial. This is, it really is different depending, the sort of the scope and complexity of crypto that passes through the financial statements. It can really create a lot of unique audit challenges. And, audits are already invasive. They're already very detailed engagements. They are time consuming. There's some tech and some evolution in the space that is maybe reducing the time of management a bit, or reducing, the time or increasing the efficiency of the auditor's testing. But again, audits are just generally not trivial. And then when it comes to adding crypto complexity to them, it really is important to be partnered with someone who has kind of done it before. You have to have someone who's gone through the cycles, who knows where they're going, and can kind of, in an independent way, hold your hand through it, so to speak. You're going to spend 100+ hours with this team, ideally with, the knowledgeable people on the team, sort of the higher level, the partner, the director, or senior manager on the account, these people that assess the risk of the job and they set out the testing procedures. The time spent with that person is really important early on in the engagement to really set the tone of the rest of the engagement, the efficiency of the rest of the engagement. I'm a big believer that audits are actually a very valuable process if you engage in them that way. If you treat them like a compliance exercise and don't care that the auditor might be a generalist and not know your business, you might get the end result checkbox. You might get the audited financial statements in your hand at the end of the day, but you're probably not going to get any value through the engagement that is good for the organization year over year. Last thing to remember is, just as a general thing, when you're shopping for an audit, you got to remember this is a unique buying relationship or a unique buying experience. We're used to buying things where, the company wants to sell you the product or the service just about no matter what. In this case, you're interviewing them. You want to find a qualified good service provider. Some of those points I just mentioned, they are also interviewing you. There's a whole set of requirements that auditors and firms need to comply with. Generally this bucket of client acceptance or client acceptance and continuance is in the standards. And so they are also interviewing you. So it's important to approach this audit buying process in a ready, knowledgeable sort of way, right? So the auditor can feel from you during these initial conversations, okay, this key point person, this company understands what this is about. They're organized, they're ready to go, they're serious about going through a financial statement audit engagement, you know, and doing it the right way.
Because they have to spend all that time with you as well, right? And this is all the points you mentioned, Noah, I think are particularly important as going through any audit, but especially the first time audits. That's when crypto companies are going through this for the first time, and they might not always be ready or understand what it entails. So let's get into the green flags, though. Let's understand that what should crypto companies look for in their crypto auditor as they're going through these conversations. Nick, I think you have a pretty good understanding of what the green flags are. What's one of them for our audience here today?
Yeah, I mean, keying in on the first one, and Noah touched on this point, right? A lot of auditors are generalists, but you're going to want to find an auditor who has experience with referenceable crypto clients, right? They've worked in the industry, and not just the crypto industry. You know, I think a lot of firms started to put up, you know, we have a blockchain practice page, but when you're interviewing and going through this process, really dig into what are referenceable clients? Do you have clients in my industry, right? If you're a Bitcoin miner, have you worked and audited another Bitcoin miner? Because the nuance between a Bitcoin miner and, say, a stablecoin issuer is vastly different. The tools you need, the knowledge, it's going to range. And again, you want this process to go as smooth as possible. It's going to be a lot of hours, and you don't want to spend a lot of those hours training them up on what's going on with your industry, what to expect. They should know that up front and be prepared for it. The good news is crypto is still a pretty tight-knit community. So, you know, of course, your auditors are going to be honest with you, but you'll also have an opportunity to reach out and start to know who's in the space, who's done the work. So you can start to vet that in the background.
Yeah, it's really not that many crypto auditors out there, especially if you're looking within a specific country or jurisdiction. At this stage, there might only be a handful that really know what they're doing. So it's a small crypto accounting, crypto audit world. Ask your friends in the industry. I think that's a great point, Nick. It's so if they've been around for a while, someone will have worked with them, talk with them, or have a little bit of information on them for sure.
For sure.
But of course, you know, crypto you mentioned is different than a lot of other industries. It's a lot more technical in nature, right? There's a lot more cryptography, digital signatures, transaction details, hashes, IDs. You know, no, what's a great way to test crypto auditors, their technical capabilities? How can we be sure that they're not just, you know, LARPing, pretending they know digital assets and blockchains? What's a good way to get a sense of how technical they are and how they understand the technology?
I think that testing ownership, so to speak, requires technical tools, and they can be different, you know, across different blockchain protocols. And so, digital signatures is like a nice litmus test, I would say, to ask about that. Say, hey, I understand, I've shared a trial balance with you, let's say, right? Maybe this is the second conversation. And I've shared the trial balance. You know, you see I've got, let's say, Bitcoin and a handful of other assets on the balance sheet. Like, how do you guys prove those up? What should I expect? Do you guys have like some tools? Are we going to be expected to maybe do some on-chain transactions? Do we need to, send some crypto to ourselves in this process? Like, sort of asking those questions will tease out the response that you need, which is, should be about, yeah, we have tools for specific chains, or specific transaction schemes or signature schemes within those chains, right? Like Bitcoin, for instance, has a number of different signature schemes. And so validating ownership could be done a couple of different ways. And maybe just to, I realize I probably should have said at the outset of like, wait, what is digital signatures to begin with? Because maybe some of the listeners don't even know, and that's fine. Essentially just taking Bitcoin as an example, right? When we're sending assets on chain, what we're doing is really signing with a private key, right? We're using a private key to sign a message, right? Which is then broadcast to the network and then goes out for confirmation and eventually addition to the ledger of the chain. And so digital signatures are a way of showing that the private key is controlled, is within the ownership, the control of the company, but doing that in a way that doesn't require sending Bitcoin on chain, right? So it's effectively the same process, but it's sort of in a silo or, in a wrapper on chain.
So
That would be
does that mean instead of signing a Bitcoin transaction with instructions saying, "Hey, send this UTXO from one address to another," it's using that same approach of the private key of sending a message. Instead of signing that transaction, you're just signing some other ancillary piece of data, essentially.
Exactly. Yeah. And the way we do it at TNF, right, is we provide a custom message, right, which has probably some words and dates in it related to the financial statement audit. And then we ask the client to go ahead and sign that message for the identified wallets that we've sort of brought in for sampling or testing. Yeah.
Thanks. No. So green flag number 2, if your auditor knows what digital signatures are, you can feel like they've gone down the rabbit hole a little bit, it sounds like. Funny story, I know when we were getting into the digital asset space as auditors, or actually before that, when we were just getting into crypto and seeing how we might be able to meld our passion with our profession, I remember having this question of how do we prove ownership of digital assets? And I went on Reddit and I said, "Hey, crypto community, how do you actually prove ownership of these things?" And I got my answer, and that took me down a rabbit hole of, wait, what are digital signatures? How do these private key things work? So, and then a couple of years later, we were actually using that methodology on engagements. So, very collaborative community.
For sure. And I remember horror stories of, taking over a client that, was just with a traditional CPA firm, didn't really have a focus on digital assets, and talking to them about this. And they'd say, yeah, our auditors would require us to have them fly out, stand over our shoulder, access the wallet, then still send a transaction. So you definitely want to cover this point up front and avoid that.
Yeah, certainly. Well, good stuff. Thanks, guys. Nick, I think you have another great one that we've talked about earlier, and I know that's key as part of our engagements. What's the next green flag for the audience?
Yeah, the next one will definitely be engagement team consistency. Okay, so we've talked about identifying this crypto expertise, and especially specifically to your niche within the industry. But as from a fair sense, firms are starting to build out their digital asset practice, so they may only have a few crypto native guys on the team, and that's fine. But are those folks going to be part of that engagement team from start to finish is really the key. You've verified they have that knowledgeable person, but are they part of the team start to finish? And the reason that matters, right, is because of course, they could come execute the digital signatures, do the ownership tests, maybe grab some balances for the audit team. But then if you don't see them again, you're going to have pain points, right? And the reasons are, as we go through the audit process, we have our planning and risk assessment phase. That knowledge they have is important for that, so that the auditor is keying in on the risk areas and not maybe unnecessarily identifying other areas that aren't an ultimate, high level risk to the engagement. And thus now you're spending more audit hours on these areas that aren't going to have a high impact. The other piece is testing and execution. So again, they come in and do the digital signatures, ownership test, balance checks, valuation. You'll want them along for the ride there to keep it efficient. And then the wrap-up phase. I think people forget about that you think, well, I just need that technical aspect. But financials and disclosures, they continue to be more elaborate with the new FASB standards. They've definitely defined additional disclosures they want. And those disclosures, while they're somewhat consistent with what you can expect, you look at like fixed assets, for example, they're going to want to see that starting balance, additions, disposals, there's unrealized gains, and then the realized gains that all net to this ultimate reconciliation you have to have in your disclosures. Maybe a generalist auditor can pick that up, but your crypto native team member is really going to have a better finger on the pulse there of, okay, I know how to separate the buckets, I know how to grab and test that fair value, and then I know how to put it into a disclosure. So that's going to be one of the biggest keys. And then I'll also call out, quality control. Every firm, Noah referenced it earlier, client acceptance phase, that's going to go through the team, but also quality control at the firm. So they're going to get some insight, and you're going to have a QC eyes on it early, but are they accepting the client and then you don't see them again until that financial statement draft comes through, and now you're at the finish line, you're getting a lot of questions that you didn't expect or weren't prepared for. So you're going to want to make sure that QC person's along for the ride. They're part of that risk assessment phase, planning phase, so that they can identify those potential issues or landmines early.
Two main things you want to avoid. You want to avoid the switcheroo, right, of personnel.
Yep.
And you want to avoid fire drills.
Exactly. Yep. That's a concise summary. You got it.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, that's great stuff. Thanks, guys. I think we have a couple more green flags for the audience. Noah, all of us have a passion for this space, but how does that relate to picking an auditor, right? Do they need to be people that have a passion for crypto? Is it something that doesn't really matter? What are some indicators that they may or may not have a passion for this space?
Yeah, I mean, I would say real quick, I think, the network firm, TNF, is unique in this regard. I still believe, I believe we're the only, CPA firm and hybrid technology firm that's 100% focused on the crypto and digital assets industry. So I think maybe we are a little bit different than the average audit firm when it comes to our interest and our passion around the space. There are others in the market that are, crypto curious and crypto passionate at different levels, but this definitely matters because, again, these engagements can quickly get complex. They can quickly get sort of laborious and difficult to perform. And so you kind of have to have something else driving you, right? You need to have some skin in the game, some real interest in the ultimate success of the larger industry. You sort of know the role you're participating. And so, yeah, and you can kind of sense this from people. You can still have a very well qualified and good audit firm, good team. They might not be fully crypto passionate. They can still be technically good auditors, but I think it really shines through in the value you get in the engagement, right? Because, again, the audit team needs to be independent of the company, right? They need to maintain that separation. But again, there's value to be delivered in audits. And if you have a passionate crypto audit team, they're going to be able to teach you things, frankly. Be willing to learn from people who look at all kinds of companies every day as opposed to just the one they're working in, like you probably. And so that there's a lot of value there. But yeah, ask them things like, hey, so why did you guys start a crypto practice? Or why do you actually do audits over crypto and digital asset companies? Listen for those answers.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's these crypto bull and bear markets. And just like every other niche in the crypto space, more auditors come during the bull market because there's more companies and they see more opportunity. But if they're around in the bear markets, I think that's a good indicator that this isn't just a fad that they're trying to take advantage of. They're looking for building expertise over the long term to be able to serve this space. And ultimately, it's ironic that we actually think all CPA firms or accounting firms should be head first into this space because at the core, blockchains are just accounting ledgers, and it's the biggest update or change in accounting ledgers in 500 years since double entry. But a lot of them are behind the ball, right? So this is a good way. I think, Noah, you pointed out a couple good questions for companies to ask audit firms to really see if they have that passion or if it's just a passing fad that they're trying to take advantage of.
Yeah, for sure. One other thing that passion brings, right, is they understand the risk. So going back to that QC point, are they along for the ride? If they're passionate about it, then they've at least, they've covered with their QC departments the general risks to expect. So that's a much smoother process where the QC knows, okay, hey, have you addressed ABC that we've seen before in this industry? Great, go ahead, accept. Or, yep, you've covered those areas, which I know now our test plan is already built out and ready to address them. So it's, again, goes back to that smoothness of the audit and lack of surprises, which I think is one of the biggest goals you'll want to have.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, so you have consistent teams, you have QC on board, you have people with knowledge, but there's more to audits, right? With digital assets, you can't just send bank confirmations. So maybe, Nick, what are some of the other unique considerations from a technical front that come up during crypto audits that aren't typically present in other, manufacturing or other types of audits that you might see?
Yeah, no, it's definitely that one of these other green flags, and you're not going to be able to send the Bitcoin core dev team a confirmation and get anything back from them, unfortunately. So it's going to require tools. When Noah was talking about digital signatures earlier, you need tools to execute on those. So it's great, you have to do them, but the next natural follow up for you is going to be, well, how are you going to execute that? What tools do you need? And again, Bitcoin miners, much simpler. You've got one chain to worry about. So hopefully they can run a node or at the very least have access to tools that plug them into a node. But if your clients in exchange, for example, they may have a vast wide net of crypto assets and going down to some small market cap stuff that, isn't as developed. So understanding what tools they need up front is going to be key, and making sure, more importantly, they understand, or they're at least asking and preparing for that, is going to be huge. And obviously, the industry's come a long way from when we started, right? There were maybe only a handful of block explorers, and those block explorers didn't do too much. You could search transactions, but you couldn't necessarily pull balances at a point in time. I think things have advanced, but they're dispersed, right? Some block explorers do a little, and as we all know, we found ourselves piecing together in the early days of, okay, well, we spun up a Bitcoin node pretty quickly, but then from there, it was a lot of eScan and some other things. So making sure they have those tools ready to go. And if they don't, I'd highly encourage them to look out for an all-encompassing tool, because those we're also starting to see get built. So obviously, LedgerLens is available. It's got 10 chains. It gives you that ability to do the digital signatures, to check balances, and ultimately reduce those audit costs, because they're not having to piece together multiple different tools.
No, I know you've had experience with this over the years. Like, do all these crypto native audit firms, do they have dev teams, or do they just rely on, explorers? Like, what does this look like in practice? Like, should these companies be asking, hey, how big is your dev team? In addition to, what does your crypto audit team look like?
I don't want to, disparage anyone's approach, right? Like, firms are trying to do their best to get into this space, but it's really difficult. So yeah, what do? Do you have sort of the one or two folks over here, and they maintain some infrastructure or run some nodes periodically or use some outside sources periodically? Do you have a dedicated team of developers that actually maintains nodes for the practice? That was sort of the historical approach that we took, was to start to spin up the tools ourselves. Run the node, index the chain, be able to write scripts to query the chain. Ultimately, what we did is then build a proprietary solution around that. Took a bunch of disparate tools that were very effective on their own and covered a lot of different audit needs, and then packaged them into what I believe is actually the only commercially available solution for other CPA firms. It's a business to business. This is for if you're watching today, this isn't, LedgerLens isn't for you necessarily directly. It's really for your auditor. It's built for auditors by auditors, and it's a block explorer on steroids is one way to think of it. But it does a really few important things that Nick alluded to, like being able to look back 3-6 months, sort of to the year end wallet balances. That's, again, not a trivial thing. And in the past, Jeremy, actually, you've had to roll back chain basically in a manual way, right? Like with certain things, that kind of exercise of going, okay, it's 3/31 and I know the client's balance now. Now let's get all the transactions that were performed and then sort of go backwards in time. Not perfect, super laborious, and can add audit costs. So
Yeah, you have two options as a CPA firm. You can either build it, right? You can host the nodes, you can build the tools, or you can buy it, right? And there might be LedgerLens is a tool out there, but there might be other tools out there that are made specifically for the crypto auditor use case. That if you're a company, right, getting audited, you're going to want to make sure that your auditor has a plan to be able to deal with the technical components of this crypto audit.
exactly.
Excellent, guys. We have a couple. We're getting close to running out of time here, so I do want to wrap this up. But I do want to give you guys an opportunity to give our listeners one more tip or trick each, something to look out for during the crypto audit process. What do you got? What alpha do you have for our listeners?
Okay. I'm going to think about sort of the startup company, has not had a financial statement audit before, let's say, is probably mostly focused, of technical co-founders and early employees that are focused really on the tech side as opposed to accounting and finance, ops. If you think about if that sort of generally describes you, you might have worked with an outside firm to do outsourced accounting, right? You do need to have books and records, right? So you might have relied on someone essentially to do some CFO advisory and get you set up for your financial records. Talk to that person, talk to that team before you talk to the auditor, it's actually not uncommon that I've talked to folks that they're really probably not ready for an audit, frankly, and they're using an outsourced service provider, but they haven't fully leveraged that outsourced service provider to get them audit ready, or at least start that conversation. So I think that's, start the shopping for the audit, but also get your outsourced firm, give them the heads up that you're looking for this audit, right? That's going to key them off to think about ensuring GAAP or IFRS, right? Compliance is there, that they're going to start document some processes for you and some controls for you. That stuff goes a long way. So let them know about your plans early, and they can help you build that stuff in. Then when it comes audit time, readiness, there's a shorter gap between sort of being ready. So I think.
Yeah, their work is about to get beat up a whole lot by an external party. So it might kick them into gear if they were ever slack.
No, 100%.
Now's the time to clean it up.
That's so true, honestly, because we do outsourced accounting as well. And on the other side of the business, we maintain books and records and act as CFO for a number of companies. And when we know that they're on an audit track, it actually really changes a lot. I mean, we always do quality work, but what it changes is, okay, these disclosures actually that are in these financials are incredibly important, right? They're always important because you have to have them, but there's a higher focus on them. And then also we immediately start kicking off more documentation, right? As opposed to sort of informal process, informal control. We start to build in more segregation of duties, more documentation around the accounting policies, more documentation around the actual accounting procedures. And that is all audit evidence, right? That ends up being valuable in the audit process.
Excellent. Well, that's a great tip, right? Get prepared early, loop in your outsourced accounting provider or your internal team members, right? So they can start to beef up their documentation and their work. Nick, what do you got for us?
I think I'd go with, capacity of the team, right? When you're scoping an audit, let's say you have a deadline for the MTL, your 12/31 year end, so you need to have that done by 3/31. Obviously if the auditor's taking the call, they think they can hit that, but really drilling into them on, hey, what is the schedule going to look like? What team's available when, so that you can plan accordingly? Because we've used this word invasive, right? The audit's invasive to you. It's your team's time, and that's time they're not spending on the business. So of course the audit's important. It's both a compliance item you need to do, and then also, as Noah alluded at the top of the call, it's going to give you a lot of good insights, hopefully. And if you have that good audit member, it's going to come with good insights, maybe some recommendations on improvements. But at the end of the day, it's your team's time away from growing your business. So you want to make sure you understand the schedule.
Yeah, I think a related alpha piece there is that basically 95% of companies, their year end is 12/31. So all their deadlines are at 3/30. I know most of the time people pick their year ends without thinking about this, but if you select a year end that's 3/31, 6/30, 9/30, you're going to have a lot less competition when you're shopping for auditors and timelines and asking firms about capacity. Sometimes you can even get better deals.
Oh, absolutely.
But that's excellent. Last tip I'll leave you got.
This season, like to put a fine point on that, not you might be able to, you almost certainly will get better pricing.
Thanks, Tana. Last tip I'll leave you guys with is LedgerLens has a directory of crypto audit firms, which is super handy, right? There's not that many crypto audit firms out there. So make sure you check it out at ledgerlens.io/crypto native audit firms. That should hopefully help streamline your process to engaging a crypto native audit firm. So there you have it, guys. 5 green flags for choosing the right crypto auditor, and even a few extra tips. Make sure you subscribe to get more content like this to help your crypto company or on-chain organization thrive in a world of wild markets, volatile regulations, and evolving tech. That's it for this TNF take. We'll catch you all on chain. Until next time, Nick, Noah, thanks for hopping on.
Thanks, Jerry.